ever get that feeling? Like, there's got to be more to things, a deeper way of looking at it all. Like, we're just scratching the surface of some huge ocean of wisdom.
I know what you mean.
That's where we're headed today, basically. Deep dive right into the thought of this pretty amazing 12th century guy, Āyn al-Qawt.
Oh, yeah. Āyn al-Qawt. Talk about a fascinating figure. This guy was like the ultimate multi-hyphenate Persian philosopher, sure.
Yeah.
But also a Sufi master, theologian, legal scholar, poet, and like a master at interpreting scripture.
A real polymath. Like, how do you even fit all that in one lifetime?
Right. So
today we're going to try to unpack some of his ideas. We're using excerpts from, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. They have this great entry on Āyn al-Qawt.
yeah, it's really comprehensive.
Our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to pull out the most important, the most intriguing bits of Āyn al-Qawt's philosophy, give you a shortcut to understanding, his impact, his legacy.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. So first things first, who was this Āyn al-Qawt? What's his story?
Well, let's see. He was born in Hamadan, Iran, back in 1097. Started out with a pretty standard education, I guess you could say, for the time. Focused on Shafi law, which is, one of the main schools of Islamic law, and Ash'ari theology. Very prominent theological school.
Okay, so pretty solid foundation there.
Yeah, but it became super clear pretty quickly that this guy, he was brilliant. He was excelling in, everything. Philosophy, logic, poetry, Arabic and Persian, by the way. Sufism, even mathematics. He studied with Umar Khayyam.
Hold on. Khayyam, like the Rubaiyat, the astronomer, poet, mathematician, Khayyam?
That's the one. So, yeah, you can kind of see already the kind of intellectual circles he was running in.
For sure. And he became a judge super early on, too, right?
Yeah, incredibly young. He got the title, Āyn al-Qawt, means most eminent judge. And they think he got that before he even turned 20.
Wow. Talk about an overachiever.
Right. And get this, even before becoming a judge, he was already writing. We've lost some of his early stuff on rational theology and math, which is a bummer. But there's this amazing love poem in Arabic, like 1,000 lines long, that still survives from that early period.
1,000 lines. So not just a judge and scholar, but a poet, too.
This guy was the real deal. Multi-talented, for sure.
I get the feeling his journey wasn't always smooth sailing.
No, not exactly. Around 1112, he goes through this major crisis of certainty, really profound. He talks about it in his writings, and it's actually pretty similar to the famous crisis that Al-Ghazali went through.
Right, the big skeptic Al-Ghazali, doubting everything.
Exactly. Ghazali had just died recently when this happened to Āyn al-Qawt, and for about 4 years, Āyn al-Qawt just dives deep into Ghazali's work. That whole exploration of skepticism, the limits of pure reason, it really seems to have hit a nerve.
So a turning point, almost, a shift towards a more spiritual focus.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And that shift leads him towards Sufism. That's the mystical tradition within Islam, right?
Right. Focused on direct experience of the divine, inner transformation.
Exactly. So 1119, he meets up with Ahmad Ghazali. That's Al-Ghazali's brother. Super influential Sufi teacher in Persia at the time.
Okay, so he's really immersing himself in this Sufi world now.
Totally. And he flourishes there, becomes a spiritual guide himself, actually, appointed by his own teacher. And you can see how this period of deep spiritual practice really starts shaping his whole philosophical outlook.
And he was writing all through this, right? Trying to work these ideas out on paper.
Oh, yeah. Wrote about 16 works, some in Arabic, some in Persian.
Wow, prolific.
We only have about 7 left now, which is a shame. But what's remarkable about his writing is how innovative it is. He goes into cosmology, the nature of the universe, metaphysics, like what is reality even, epistemology, how do we know things, and even the nature of love. Really breaking new ground here.
You mentioned some of his surviving works earlier. Can you tell us a bit more about them? What were the big ones?
Sure. So one that stands out is this Shaqwa al-Gharib. Translates to the Exile's Complaint. It's not that long, but it's really powerful. He wrote it in prison in 1129, basically defending himself against all these heresy charges that were being thrown at him.
Heresy. Wow. Okay. We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. Another really important one is the Zubdat al-Laqabiq. That's the essence of reality. It's a bit more dense, philosophical, it's about Sufism. And get this, he wrote the whole thing in just 3 days.
3 days.
Yeah, when he was only 24. It's incredible. It's considered to be the first full-blown philosophical defense of mysticism in Islamic thought. He draws on Avicenna, Ghazali, and kind of anticipates a lot of the stuff that Ibn Arabi would become famous for later on.
So he's synthesizing all these different strands of thought, building on them.
Exactly. And he does it in 3 days.
This guy doesn't mess around. What about the Persian works? You mentioned there were a couple of major ones that survived.
Right. So his masterpiece, the one everyone knows him for, is the Tamhidat, which means paving the path. Finished in 1127. It's written in this really beautiful, poetic Persian. Lays out his mature thinking on philosophy, theology, law, mysticism. Big focus on non-duality, the interconnectedness of everything, and the importance of self-knowledge.
Self-knowledge. Sounds like a theme we're going to see a lot of.
Definitely. And the other major Persian work is the Namaha, the letters.
Yeah.
3 volumes of letters to students, disciples, even people in the government. Super insightful, not only about his ideas, but also about like his role as a teacher, his views on the corruption in the Seljuk government at the time. He really didn't hold back.
Which, sadly, seems to have landed him in hot water.
It did. In 1128, he gets hit with this fatwa, which is, a legal opinion, basically calling for his execution for heresy. It was backed by the state.
Yeah.
But in that exile's complaint book, he's like, this is ridiculous. I mean, think about it. He's being accused of heresy for ideas that are basically rooted in Ghazali, who is totally supported by the Saudi government. It's almost funny.
Yeah, kind of ironic, right? So what was the real reason behind all this?
Most scholars think it was his criticism of the Seljuk government. He called them out on corruption, social injustice, didn't make himself very popular with the powers that be. He even writes about how other religious scholars, maybe out of jealousy, they didn't really come to his defense.
Classic case of speaking truth to power and facing the consequences.
Sadly, yes. So 1131, he's executed in Hamadan, his hometown. The Seljuk vizier oversaw the whole thing, apparently using it as a way to, score political points.
Wow, what a way to go.
They did build a tomb for him later on, which became a big pilgrimage site for Sufis, but eventually it was destroyed. It's a reminder, I think, of how philosophy, how spiritual ideas, they can get all tangled up with politics, with power.
Definitely. All right, well, let's try to untangle some of those ideas now, starting with knowledge. ʿAyn al-Qawt, he made a really important distinction, right, between 2 different kinds of knowing.
He did. Really fundamental distinction between ilm and marifa. Ilm is more like knowledge as we usually think of it. Discursive, intellectual. Knower and the known are separate. It's like knowing about something.
Okay, so like textbook stuff, facts and figures.
Yeah, exactly. But marifa, that's different. That's more like recognition. Gnosis, even. It's not discursive. It's unifying. That gap between the knower and the known, it disappears. It's direct, intuitive, like you already understand it deep down.
So more like an inner knowing, a realization.
Right. And he saw this as a higher form of cognition, something you reach through, he calls it the eye of the heart.
Very poetic.
Yeah, he was a poet after all.
True, true.
And what you recognize through this eye, it's like the fundamental truths of existence, the realities that are already there inside you, in your soul.
This is almost like Plato's idea of recollection, that we're actually remembering things we knew before we were born.
Yeah, there's definitely an echo of that in ʿayn al-Qawt's thinking. He definitely agreed with Plato that the soul, like the deepest part of us, the uncreated part, it already has this familiarity with these fundamental realities before we get all embodied.
Before we get stuck in these meat suits.
Right, exactly. So Marifa is about rediscovering that knowledge, although he doesn't get too specific about what exactly that prior knowledge is, just that it's about the self, understanding your true nature.
And this was a pretty big departure from Avicenna's theory of knowledge, wasn't it?
It was. Avicenna was all about definitions, logical arguments, syllogisms, starting with your senses, then memory, imagination, then intellect. He even had this whole idea of the active intellect that helps us grasp universals.
Right, that higher intelligence that illuminates our minds.
Exactly. But for ʿayn al-Qawt, that was all still ilm. Important, but not the whole story.
So he's going beyond Avicenna, taking it a step further.
He is. And later Sufi thinkers like Suhrawardi and the followers of Ibn Arabi, they would build on this idea even more. They'd say that real knowledge, it requires a transformation of your being. That knowledge isn't just information, it's about becoming.
Whoa. Knowledge is being. That's heavy.
Right. And it all starts with ʿayn al-Qawt making that initial distinction.
So, okay, how do you achieve this marifa? How do you get to that deeper knowing?
For him, it's through spiritual practice. Purifying yourself, cultivating that inner vision, transcending the limits of Ordinary knowledge, book learning, arriving at true self-knowledge.
Easier said than done, I imagine.
No kidding. He even uses that story of Moses and Khidr from the Quran to illustrate this.
Yeah.
You know, how Moses, even though he's a prophet, he can't understand Khidr's actions at first.
Right. Kidder seems to be doing all these, like, morally questionable things.
Exactly. And it's only when Khidr explains the deeper divine wisdom behind it all that Moses gets it. That's like Marifa. It goes beyond surface-level morality, beyond logic.
So what about the soul? Where did that fit in for Āyn al-Qawwad? He had some interesting ideas about the soul and the body, right?
Oh, yeah. He didn't agree with Avicenna and those who said the soul doesn't exist before the body. But he also admitted that there's no, like, airtight logical proof for it. He said his certainty on this came from Marifa, from that inner knowing.
Interesting. So he's relying on both reason and intuition here.
He is. He argued that we understand the soul because of what we observe in the body, perception, movement, those sorts of things. And we know the soul continues after death because knowledge, which belongs to the soul, can't be divided or destroyed. Again, kind of like Plato there.
Right, the soul's immortality. So he's saying the soul is pre-existent, right? It exists before it enters the body.
Yep. And he said its state changes when it comes into the body, and that there are all these degrees of diversity among souls. Some souls, like the prophets, they have a direct connection to God, no intermediaries.
Wow, so like different levels of spiritual evolution almost.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
But he also acknowledged that environment, the body, it can influence the soul. But certain souls, those created in God's image, they can reflect the divine more directly. Most of us, though, we've got these intermediaries, you know, it's like a chain, a hierarchy, from the spiritual realm down to the material world.
So where does reason fit into all of this? Āyn al-Qawwad was obviously a very intelligent, rational guy.
For sure. He valued reason, Alkali. He saw it as essential for figuring out truth and falsehood in our daily lives.
Yeah.
But he also thought it had limits. You can't use reason alone to understand things like the afterlife or God's nature or those sorts of immaterial realities. It's just not equipped for it.
He was big on that idea of the stage beyond reason, right? A phrase he borrowed from Ghazali.
Yep. Al-Yawar Allah. He saw it as analogous to the soul-body relationship. It's like a higher mode of knowing. You get there through purifying yourself, opening your heart.
So it's not just about thinking harder.
Not at all. It's about a different kind of understanding, something that goes beyond our ordinary intelligence. Just like our senses can't grasp abstract concepts, our reason can't grasp this higher reality.
And he actually thought our senses could get in the way, right?
They can. We get so caught up in the material world, in our senses, that it blocks our access to this higher knowing. And the only way to get there is through true self-recognition, through Marifa.
So it's about transcending those limitations. And he also talked about tasting, right? Like you can taste truth.
That's the Sufi concept of Dak. It's about the experience of Marifa. Not a physical taste, obviously, but it's direct, personal. You apprehend truth in a way that's almost sensory, even though it's not.
Interesting. Like a gut feeling, but more profound.
Right. And language, he said, it can't fully capture this kind of knowing. Ultimately, Marifa leads to this state of perception, idrak. And in that state, the distinction between the perceiver and the perceived, it just dissolves.
You become one with what you're perceiving.
And with the ultimate perceiver, God.
Oh, okay.
But he also said that in this life, that stage beyond reason, it's really only available to those who have achieved true self-recognition.
It's all connected. Okay, let's talk about his metaphysics now. His ideas about God, existence, that kind of stuff. Where did he even begin with all that?
He starts with the ultimate reality, calls it the self or essence, al-dat. But he makes it very clear that this is beyond our comprehension. You can't really think about it, can't describe it. It's infinite. It's the reality of reality, he said.
So how do you even talk about something like that?
It's tough. He said it has no multiplicity, no potentiality, no actuality. It's like, imagine a single point, geometric point, but with no dimensions. And from that point, all of existence emanates perfectly.
So it's beyond our senses, beyond our concepts. But he still thought we could demonstrate its existence.
He did. He argued for it using what he called certain truth, based on the Quran, basically. His argument was if there's no eternal being, no self-existent being, then nothing else could exist. Because everything that has a beginning, everything that's contingent, it needs a cause.
Okay, so everything needs a cause, and that chain of causes leads back to...
The necessary existent, the uncaused cause, the eternal God.
Makes sense.
He builds on Avicenna's ideas about necessary and contingent existence, too. But he reinterprets them through the lens of kalam, which is Islamic rational theology.
Okay, so he's bringing in those theological arguments.
Yep, he's saying, look, anything that's originated in time, it needs a cause outside of itself. It can't cause itself. And that leads you back to something that's eternal, uncaused.
So even if you imagine an infinite chain of causes, something still has to start that chain.
Exactly, and that's the necessary existence.
All right, but how do you reconcile that with God's attributes? We describe God in all sorts of ways, with all these different names. How does that work with the idea of a single ultimate reality?
That's a classic theological problem. He said the divine self in itself is beyond all names. It's ineffable. But it manifests, it relates to the cosmos through these names, these attributes.
So like different facets of the same diamond.
Kind of, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he really emphasized how important these names are for Sufis. They resonate with their inner states, guide their actions.
It's not just an abstract theological concept.
Nope. It's very practical, very experiential.
Okay, but how do you square the circle? One God, multiple attributes.
He seems to lean towards the Asher position. They said God's attributes subsist within the essence.
They're not separate things.
Right. He used analogies like the ocean and its drops, or how water is called different things in different languages. It's all the same underlying reality, just being perceived differently.
So those attributes, they're perfections of the essence seen from different angles.
Exactly. Like God's power, it becomes apparent when you look at creation, at the beings that are objects of power. Same with desire, knowledge. The whole universe is like God's self-expression.
So it's all coming from that one source.
Right. And he said, only those who are, let's say, less enlightened, they see a separation between the power and the powerful, the desire and the desiring.
They miss the underlying unity.
They do? So what's his take on being itself, on existence?
He's saying ultimately being is one, and it's identical with the divine essence. Even though we talk about necessary and contingent beings, really it's all one.
Whoa, okay.
Contingent beings, everything other than God, they have their being through God. Their existence depends on God. He even says there's no self in existence other than He.
So that sounds a lot like Wadat al-Wujud,
Yeah.
oneness of being.
It does, doesn't it? He says nothing can exist independently from God. If it did, that'd mean there were two ultimate realities. And the multiplicity we see, it's not like it has its own existence. It exists within God, depends on God. He even quotes the Quran, where it says everything except God is evanescent, fleeting.
And he compares it to a reflection in a mirror.
Right. The reflection depends on the object and the viewer. So it's all about perspective.
And that's where Marifa comes in again. He says you need that spiritual insight to really grasp this. Our usual way of seeing things makes us think there's more separation than there actually is. But someone with that inner vision, they see God with everything, but also prior to everything.
That's a tricky balance.
It is. But he was very clear that this wasn't pantheism. He used the word Maya, which means withness, to describe God's relationship to creation.
So God is with everything.
But nothing has the same level of withness as God. God is still distinct, ontologically and logically prior. Only God truly exists. Everything else just appears to exist, and only in relation to God.
Okay. Let's move on to something a little more, I guess, personal. The self, inwardness, the role of the heart. This seems to be really central to his Sufism.
Definitely. He was very influenced by that Sufi saying, "He who knows himself knows his Lord." He said, you can't really recognize God. You can't have marifa of God without knowing yourself.
So self-knowledge is the key.
It unlocks the door, for sure. But he wasn't talking about, like, your ego, your personality. That's the lower self. He said, you got to know God, through God's light, which is existence itself.
Not through our limited human perspective.
Right, the lower self, it gets in the way, veils us. He said, the real seeker seeks God through God. But those who are stuck in their ego, they see God through themselves. And they end up seeing only themselves.
A reflection instead of the real thing.
Exactly. He also talked about how the universe is a manifestation of God's names, God's attributes.
So by studying the universe, you can come to know God.
You can. But he said God's light is also present within us, in our hearts. And by turning inward, by exploring our inner being, which is like a microcosm of the universe, we can achieve true self-recognition. And in that recognition, there's no separation anymore. Knowing yourself reveals God's attributes within you.
So it's an inward journey.
It is. And the ultimate goal is to find God within. He said the path to God, it's always open to those who are sincere, who have ilab, that yearning, that seeking, and the irda, that commitment to a spiritual guide.
So a guide is important.
Definitely. But it's about moving from external guidance to internal recognition, cultivating that inwardness.
Turning the focus inwards.
He even said the path to God isn't out there in the world, not in heaven, not in some afterlife. It's within us, in our hearts.
The heart, it seems to be a really big deal for him.
Huge. Sufis talk a lot about the heart. ʿAyn distinguished between the physical heart and the spiritual heart. He said the spiritual heart is the center of perception, emotions, deep understanding.
The seat of the soul, almost.
Yeah, you could say that. And he identified the heart with the consciousness of God that resides at our core. That's what he was interested in, that deepest level. He said, that's why we find God within, because God is in our hearts. And he even said God created everything within you in that inner space.
So how do you access that space?
He talked about circumambulating the heart.
What does that even mean, walking around your heart?
It's a metaphor. It means focusing your whole being on the heart, purifying it. That's the path to the spiritual goal. And if you mess up, if you get distracted, if you lose that focus, you lose yourself.
So stay focused on the heart.
He said, search for the heart and grab hold of it. He believed the heart can know itself, that it's aware of itself as the object of God's gaze. Norga Hikura.
That's beautiful.
But only a pure heart can reflect God's presence. He famously said, God doesn't have any condition for you, but you empty your heart. And when God's gaze rests on a pure heart, it becomes your moral compass. You consult the mufti of your heart, your inner guide. That's a powerful image. Okay, last big topic, good and evil, free will. What was his take on all that?
Like many Islamic thinkers, he connects existence with light. Nur. God, the necessarily existent, is the necessary light, the source of all other lights.
So light as a symbol of being, of goodness.
Right. And just as everything else is dependent on God, their light is metaphorical compared to God's light. It's less real, less intense.
So the further you are from God, the dimmer your light.
Yeah, you could say that. But he was also adamant that God is pure goodness. So things are good to the extent that they reflect God's light.
So there's no absolute evil out there like in Zoroastrianism.
Nope, no independent principle of darkness. Evil is unreal in a way. It's relational, isbati.
So like, depending on your perspective.
He gives the example of cupping. To a child, it seems evil because it hurts, but the parents know it's for their good.
Right. Same thing can look different depending on your understanding. He thought prophets, spiritually realized people, they know only good comes from God. What we see as bad, it's just our limited understanding. He said real evil would contradict God's mercy.
Okay, so if evil's unreal, then everything is essentially good. But how do we account for all the bad stuff that happens?
He says, yeah, we experience things we call evil. But they don't have their own independent reality. They're real in the sense that they're part of our relationships with things.
But those relationships themselves are ultimately grounded in God.
Right. He talks about essential evil, which is like when something doesn't fulfill its potential, that's a privation of being, of light, so a kind of darkness.
Makes sense.
But he focused more on relational evils, like Avicenna. He said everything in the cosmos is perfect, beautiful when you see it from the right perspective.
Even the things that seem bad to us.
Yeah. He uses the example of water. It nourishes fish, but it can also drown people. It all depends. He said true evil would mean there's a flaw in creation, and that can't be. So evil is relational, not absolute. It doesn't affect God's goodness or the perfection of the world.
Okay. What about cause and effect? And free will?
He saw secondary causes, the things that seem to cause stuff in the world. They're part of God's order. But they're ultimately rooted in God's agency, his sana, which is like the way God does things.
So God is the ultimate cause.
Yeah. He leans towards a kind of divine compulsion. God is the source of action.
So where does that leave human free will?
He thought we do have choice. But it's a compelled, constrained freedom. We're compelled by our very nature.
So we're free to choose, but our choices are limited by who we are.
Right. It's like the way the universe works. It's governed by laws, but within those laws, things can happen. Use the example of love a lot to illustrate this.
Love. That seems like a jump.
It'll make sense in a minute. We had to talk about imagination, beauty, and love now. It's all connected.
All right, let's do it.
So post-Avicennan thinkers, including Āyn, they were really into this idea of imaginalization, tamathul.
Okay, what is that? Sounds made up.
It's basically using your imagination to bridge the gap between abstract ideas and concrete forms, like stories, poetry, art. It's how you translate meaning, mano, into form, aura.
So taking those big philosophical concepts and making them understandable.
Making them relatable, experiential. And they compared imagination to dreams, to mirrors, realms between existence and non-existence.
Right, because a reflection in a mirror, it's there, but it's not really there.
Exactly. And Āyn al-Qawt uses that mirror analogy to talk about how everything is transient except God.
God is the only constant.
Right. Everything else is like a fleeting reflection. But if you have true recognition, you see that even the seemingly solid things outside the mirror, they're also impermanent.
Wow, okay.
And he applies this idea of imaginalization to Scripture, to how we experience beauty, but especially to love.
So love needs imagination.
He thought so. He goes into this whole analysis of love, ish, mat'aba, dusti, different kinds of love. And he talks about how the lover, by seeing the beloved, which is ultimately God, reflected in all these forms of beauty in the world, they participate in God's self-love, in God's self-revelation.
So love is a way of knowing God.
It is. And he said, without this imaginalization, people on the spiritual path would be like unbelievers. They wouldn't be able to see the different aspects of God.
Because they're stuck in one limited perspective.
Right. But when you see more beauty in the world, your love grows. And he even interpreted those Quranic verses about God loving humanity and humanity loving God through this lens of imaginalization. The lover sees the beloved in new ways, and they become more loving themselves.
It's a beautiful idea. And you mentioned his interpretation of the Iblis story earlier. That's a pretty wild example of this imaginalization thing.
Oh yeah, he thought the story of Iblis, Satan, could reveal all sorts of secrets. He was following those who talked about Tad Iblis, the monotheism of Iblis.
Wait, Satan is a monotheist?
That's the idea. He said Iblis refused to bow to Adam, not out of pride, but because he was totally devoted to God, his first love, his source.
So a very unconventional take.
Very. But in the Quran, Iblis isn't actually called evil.
Interesting.
So Āyn al-Qawt is saying, look, Iblis was compelled by his love for God. He couldn't do anything else. He had no choice.
So it's an illustration of his theory of action. We're compelled by our nature, humans by our nature of choice, Iblis by his nature of love.
Exactly. And he says, the lover is choiceless without his desire, without his choice. To really love, you have to surrender, abandon yourself, prefer love above all else. Iblis, he chose separation from God's command in order to stay true to his love for God. Āyn al-Qawt even says Iblis can teach us something about yearning for God, about being selfless even when it's hard. He calls him an aspirant of the quality of Iblis.
So there's something noble in Iblis' refusal.
Āyn al-Qawt seems to think so. He says the madness of love is better than worldly smarts. The true lover is selfless, pathless. Host.